The town of Scituate's 2022 May elections are Saturday, May 21st, from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. in that high school gym. And if you get your 2022 ballot and think it looks a little like the 2021 ballot, you're not alone. Why?
Because once again, there's only one contested race.
And once again, that falls underneath that school committee. What's different this time is that there are 2 seats up for grabs. In position 1, it's Carrie Borkowski and Michelle Kramer. In position 2, Nicole Brandolini and Richard Taft. Nicole Brandolini has served on that school committee since 2019, and she says during that time, she, along with that school committee, have made great strides in education, equity in the classrooms, and transparency when it comes to budgeting and hiring. Still, she admits the Scituate Public School Systems is not perfect and that there is still a lot of work to do. Right now, it is your time to meet Nicole Brandolini. Nicole Brandolini, great to see you in person too, after 2 years of virtually seeing you. And I got to say this too, I think with the virtual meetings, I would think your children are a little bit of celebrities around town with the amount of snuggle time they demand.
That's funny. I was thinking about that this morning, about how they always have a cameo on.
I love it. I love it. It's great. It's great. We'll get to business in a second, but I want to ask you this. When you're in those meetings and there's a heated discussion going on or debate,
yeah.
And your kid goes in and says, "Mom, my stomach hurts," all right, I can't go to sleep, I'm reading me a story. How do you manage that?
Mute. No, I mean, honestly, I have a lot of support with my husband. He really, he's awesome, and he really helps in those moments where, you know, he's behind the computer. He'll be like, "Come back over here. No, Mom's on a meeting. Quiet, come back." But, you know, they're curious, and I love that they get to see their mom kind of doing good things for the community. I think it's a good model for them. And, you know, there's a struggle with mom guilt, I guess it's called, where, you know, you put yourself out there for a community, but kind of at the, you know, it's a detriment sometimes to your personal relationships, especially with little kids at home. Mm-hmm. But overall, you know, when we're doing good things, it benefits my kids too. And like I said, my husband and I have a good partnership in that. So while we don't really have any extended family around, we have amazing friends. Good. And honestly, like, people in this community help me all the time and kind of lift me up. And we have people right now, you know, taking care of my kids, carpooling them to baseball games and such. So I'm very thankful and grateful. That's
good. You are a busy woman, so let's get down to business here. First and foremost, I want to make sure you can introduce yourself and explain why you are rerunning for that school committee.
So again, I'm Nicole Brandolini. Thank you, Seth and SCTV, for this opportunity. So I grew up in Peabody. I'm not from Scituate. My husband is from Scituate, so he grew up here, and Scituate's very dear to him. He has so many fond memories at Scituate High School, and he didn't have the most structured or safe family life growing up, so he spent a lot of time at friends' houses, and you know, just Scituate's very dear to his heart, and it kind of gave him guidance, and through the music department especially, and teachers really helped him, because he could have been a kid who didn't make it, didn't graduate, and he did because of good teachers. So, and good community members and families. So we've always loved Scituate, and knew that we wanted to raise a family here. We had met in Boston. I was going to BU at the time. So, you know, that kind of is what brought us back here. We've lived here for 10 years. But I grew up in Peabody, like I said. It's a very, excuse me, political-oriented town, you know, very proud, very diverse city. You know, there's a lot of celebration of different cultures, different backgrounds. And when you're growing up there, you don't really know, you don't know any difference, so I never really thought about it. But, you know, now, ever since moving out, moving to Boston, going to college, you know, you see the world differently a little bit. But we had in high school a really neat student government day process that we were able to shadow somebody in the whole city government, everybody, and you could kind of run for mock election. And being a student, I was sort of interested in teaching at the time, and in high school, maybe I want to be a teacher. So I thought it made sense to shadow a school committee member, so I did that. And it was a great experience. I loved the process, and it kind of always stuck with me as something that, you know, maybe in the real world I'd get involved in something like that. So at the same time, I've always kind of been a volunteer. You know, I can't explain where it comes from. I think if you're the type of person that likes that stuff, you just are. So different groups, you know, I volunteered with in college, BU community service committees. I was a volunteer for the Greater Boston Food Bank for many years. So it came naturally to me when my kids were going to kindergarten at Cushing to step up and volunteer there. So I started getting involved with the PTO, and my first role there was on Cushing Cares, and we did a lot of community service for folks in town and with different groups. So that kind of springboarded me to the following year. I was the vice president at Cushing PTO. So it was a pretty natural trajectory for me to kind of increase my level of involvement in the schools. My kids now are in kindergarten, first grade, fifth grade, and seventh grade. And I've been volunteering with Cushing since Bennett, my oldest, started there. So I immediately also jumped into school council. There were vacant positions, and you know, that also I felt really comfortable there as well. So that lasted for a good 7 years. I've run with, you know, alongside other parents, of course, different fundraisers, different programs for enrichment. With the school council, it was a really great way to get a baseline understanding of a school budget. So, you know, in school committee we have our, you know, full district budget, but you can kind of get this simplified version if you're just looking at a Cushing school budget and how that breaks down into materials and curriculum pieces and, you know, salaries and all of the pieces and components of a budget. So that brought me to an opportunity to volunteer on the the subcommittee that was looking at building the new elementary school. And the charge of that subcommittee was mostly to look at configuration. It wasn't to decide whether or not this would be something that was approved, or where it would go, what location would be at. It was solely to look at what should the structure of this thing be. And that was a long time ago. It was under Superintendent John McCarthy was still running the show back then. And from that experience, I met many people in administration, other teachers at other buildings, department chairs, and was encouraged to run for school committee from then. So that's sort of how my path to where I ran for election in 2019.
Good. The election last year with the school committee, the focus, of course, was really around the pandemic and
right.
COVID-19. Good times. Thankfully, I think that has definitely shifted. The phrase of this election really seems to be academic excellence. You see on everybody's website, it's talked about all that time.
Absolutely.
I will say this, is that I feel when it comes to academic excellence, the amount of information, reports, data that is out there can be dizzying.
Absolutely.
So before we even talk how we think SPS is doing with academic excellence, I want to know this. When you formulate how you think Scituate Public Schools is doing when it comes to academic excellence, where do you go to get your information?
Sure. So you're right. So the answer also involves a lot of information because, you know, it is a complicated topic. Yeah. So when I'm looking, you know, if I look at there's so many levels to it. So if I look at this professionally as a school adjustment counselor, we look at data on a daily basis. Part of my job is helping kids closing gaps and identifying barriers that prevent them from reaching their academic potential. So, you know, we look at individual measures. We look at, as part of a multidisciplinary team, we look at IEP data. We look at 504, social emotional learning data on math and reading scores, DIBEL scores, teachers, information from teachers, information from parents, of course, first and foremost, different benchmarks, MCAS scores, and occasionally private testing that someone would have out of district. So I think there's a level to looking at data when we are trying to sort of describe or quantify academic excellence that is extremely personal and tough to communicate, especially at a school committee level, because when we present there, we're looking at global data. You know, we're not trying to kind of hone in on an individual student, and it's a catch-22 to me because, you know, I look at individual student data and I see a kid who, you know, just as an example, you know, my own son had COVID. 2-3 weeks ago now, and it was one of the MCAS testing dates, so he missed it. He's always performed very, very well on MCAS. He's very academically oriented, and I don't want to say he looks forward to MCAS, but he certainly has, he's fine with it. All he wants, as long as he has gum and candy to get him through it, he's happy. So, you know, I couldn't help but think to myself as an adjustment counselor, and then as a school committee member thinking about this data, that, you know, okay, so Bennett misses the MCAS, fine, life happens, and so then he's in it for a makeup day. And we had been away. We went away for April vacation week. So, and I get an email, your student is, you know, has MCAS makeup tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. or 7 a.m. at middle school, 7:30. And I'm like, oh, Bennett, you have MCAS tomorrow. He's like, oh, you know, and this is like, he had the sort of process go through with teachers with MCAS prep, and they, you know, prepare the students for it, both emotionally, mentally, and, you know, academically. And then he missed the real test. Now he's taking a makeup in a different setting, kind of, oh, it's tomorrow. Will his outcome be the same as if he had had the opportunity to take it the natural way? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he'll do better. I don't know. You know, so I think when you kind of hone in on individuals, everybody has a story to tell. You know, maybe, you know, maybe some student had a really bad morning, or, you know, so you're really, the test gets taken at that moment in time, and it's a reflection of that person's state at that time. So it's really hard when we look at data, and of course, you know, that's why we look at a multitude of data to kind of try to quantify what's going on here with different students. So when did you want to ask me?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
You can cut me off if I start to keep going. So when we look at, you know, I'm really well versed in curriculum standards and developmental benchmarks and external factors that influence a child's academic performance. To me, they're just not numbers and polls. So I find it difficult sometimes to sit in a meeting and say, you know, this group's not performing where they should be. I'm like, well, you know, I need to go so deep to find out why. And those things matter to me so much, the individual experience, that I don't like to put such a high pressured, you know, value on some of this data that comes up that's very high level. You know, I think it's important. I think we need to track these things. I know that the Department of Education, DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, you know, when they're looking at things like MCAS scores, you know, they're looking at almost to find deficits, not excellence per se. They're looking to find out what districts are not performing well that need more support. You know, MCAS is another kind of interesting test because, you know, they are looking at even the new MCAS. There's going to be new benchmarks for MCAS. So the dial's kind of always moving with that. And I think, you know, academic excellence to me is an individualized story, and, you know, test taking is important. I think test taking skills are important. There's always going to be measures out there, you know, even out, you know, when people are in the workforce. So I think it's very important, but, you know, I look at trends. I want to see different trends in the data. If we're seeing, you know, one particular class isn't performing well, well, why? You know, we need to look at that. We need to track it. You need time. We need more information all the time. So I'm always looking for trends and how we can better support students to help them achieve what to them excellence means. Because I think Scituate's lucky, and I think we're in a place that we have a very clear, very solid team, and that we are in a place that we can say, you know, why didn't that particular student meet the marks that they and their parents and their teachers think they could be? You know, I don't think we're following trends that are so far in the negative for a massive amount of people. I mean, we're talking about a district that Scituate performed in the top 87% of the state on MCAS. When you get into the minutia, there's certainly improvements that can be made. I 100% agree. I've been advocating for it for 3 years. That's part of the reason why we have new administrative team, and, you know, bringing on our new assistant superintendent has been wonderful. Her skill set is in data, and that was something that the community and school committee really was looking for in a candidate to recommend to Superintendent Burkhead. So, we've been listening, we've agreed, we are parents ourselves. I want all kids to perform at their top level.
You mentioned Assistant Superintendent Heidi Driscoll, and she'll slap me on the wrist for this, but I'm going to do it because, as you pointed out, she's really about data.
Yes.
And she says asking these broad questions
right.
is, it's difficult to do that because
Yes.
there's so many parts that go into that sum,
Yep.
but I'm still going to do it. So
Sure.
after you have all your information, how do you think Scituate Public Schools is doing when it comes to academic excellence?
I think Scituate Public Schools is doing wonderful when it comes to academic excellence. And I think that because of student outcomes. I think that different pieces are important to different people. We have people that put, something to some people that's very valuable is how we're doing in polls against other towns or nationally. Since my tenure here, we've risen in the U.S. World News Report. That was very important to some people. I can respect that. We've gone from number 102 to number 55, during the pandemic. That information includes data that was tracked for 3 years, and the report just came out a few weeks ago. We've also risen up in the Boston Magazine Best High School. We're in the top 50 at number 48 now. So I think there's school rankings that can kind of guide that piece of the puzzle. I think that when we look at ultimate outcomes, it's what are students doing after they leave Scituate and how are they performing, outside of Scituate Public Schools. And we have recently started to be more attentive to that data and follow graduates and look at, because that's the outcome, are people becoming great citizens, outside of SPS. So, if you look at the current senior class, what's the goal here? Graduating students on to whatever, and opening up opportunities for all students to go on to whatever the next thing is that they want to do, and have those doors be open for them to continue on in their journey. So, you look at the class of 2022, we've got kids going to universities around the country, around the world: Notre Dame, Tufts, UC Syracuse, Sacred Heart, Colby, Pepperdine, UC Chapel Hill, Brandeis, Penn State, Loyola, Suffolk, Northeastern, UVM, Cornell, Harvard, NYU. Students going right into the workforce, working in trades, students going into the military. We have students playing, going in the trajectory of semi-professional athletics. To me, that's, you're educating a child from kindergarten or pre-K in this town all the way through graduation. To me, that's a profile of a very successful group of individuals. So we can look at, I don't know how these kids did on MCAS.
Right.
But I know that they're an exceptional group of students with resilience. They were educated at Scituate High School through a pandemic. They spent part of their, as I don't have to repeat it, but they spent the greater part of their time here at home or in masks, and they are thriving. And I should say, I don't want to, and of course this is my adjustment counselor therapist piece, saying that there are kids that are thriving in no way for me ever discounts that there are also kids that are struggling and need more. So for me, it's about never letting those kids fall through the cracks, and really, we should always be keeping our eye on who else needs us. What else can we do for those kids? Because those are my kids. Those are the kids that I work with, and I love them very much.
We talked a lot about the students. I want to talk a little bit about the teachers. I was talking to a math teacher who was discussing teaching his class, and for him, his curriculum was very structured. It was this day, almost like paint by the numbers.
Sure.
So even though, as a school committee member, you don't dictate curriculum, do you sometimes worry that curriculums can be constricting for teachers and hindering individualized learning?
Sure. Yes, of course. So, it's tough. I work in elementary education, so it's a little bit different than high school, where, they're getting into, like you said, a math teacher that teaches a particular, that's their expertise, that's their subject matter. In elementary, you've got a teacher that is almost like a jack of all trades and teaching all subject areas. I think that that's something that teachers always struggle with, and it's hard to speak to it unless you're in their shoes and can really, again, like as a school committee member, it's just not my role is to support them and to make sure that they have, that we are making policies that are supportive and opening doors for teachers and students and, that sort of thing. that we have good administrators in place for those teachers to advocate for whatever they need to make sure that their curriculum is, and they have the teaching materials that they need. And to make sure our budget is sound, solid, transparent, so that, again, it supports the tools and the delivery of the education that our kids deserve. Yes, so when you're looking at curriculum, is it restrictive? I'm sure that some teachers feel that way, especially, they do have parameters set by DESE that they have to really follow. And, it's a lot to squeeze in, certainly, in a school year, especially at a time when the social emotional needs are so high for students. It was said at the forum the other night at how, and I can tell you firsthand, like you walk into a class and, again, keep in mind, elementary school, I have a couple kids, you see kids under desk crying, they, whatever their backgrounds may be, they had a really bad morning, it derails the entire class. Mm-hmm. So how's that teacher supposed to get to what the kids are supposed to do that day in that lesson plan when all eyes are on, so-and-so under the desk, or, there's so many things, human beings, right? Like it's unpredictable sometimes. So I think we can do our best by teachers by giving them the professional development that they need, and we're really trying to be responsive. We're just out the gate with that, with, Heidi Driscoll is doing a great job with, after they have a PD, there's a feedback, and they're being rated and they're tracking, like, what did the teachers like? What did they find helpful? What did they find useful? I received PD too as a teacher, and I hope my district doesn't see my, I'm not going to complain about my own district, but, it's just normal teacher stuff. Like some of it's helpful and some of it's like, oh, I just wish I had time in my classroom to do X, Y, Z, because that's what I need the time for. But, it's the administrator's role to provide teachers with this PD. So it's kind of like a tug of war. And there is the MCAS pressure and, prepping kids, we don't want to teach to the test, but we are going to follow, the math standards, and the standards might change for a certain thing, and then you've got to shift. Or, we see this area is a struggle for kids. We got to move, and it's like moving a big battleship. It doesn't turn. We don't pivot quickly. We pivot over years, not over days. With this big picture curriculum stuff. You get a new. You say, oh, Scituate's lacking in the math. Let's just say it's math grades. So, we need a new curriculum. It's time for us to review these things. We need to do more. We want more. We need to do something. Well, you've got your money piece. So how much does a new Eureka curriculum cost? Tens of thousands of dollars. That program alone was over $70,000, plus professional development. That Eureka program has been piloted was piloted a few years ago. So if Cushing's piloting or one classroom at Cushing's piloting, and then one or two are piloting in Jenkins and so on. Other kids are receiving curriculum through, I can't remember the old program now off the top of my head, but and then they take the MCAS. And why did this group do better than that group? Well, you have to pilot it to see if it's a good fit, track the data from that to see if it's working and helping and that it's a good program, it's a good fit for Scituate and our students. MCAS happens once a year, the benchmarks happen a few times a year, so it just takes a lot of time, I think, and it's hard to track those things for years and to remember back to say, oh, well, yeah, I guess, we needed this is where we were at the time, and then, the pandemic and what happens with that, looking at things, getting more, something I think that's come out of the pandemic that's been positive is more virtually based programs, and they're a little bit more sustainable. So we've been purchasing things that are, when we say they're kind of sustainable, it's more, we get, the ESSER monies that come in from, that are really related to learning loss and pandemic, but we want to invest in things that are going to benefit students, benefit teachers, and, sometimes that's not just being reactive and hiring more people, that when that money goes away, then you find yourself needing to reduce staffing, and we don't want to do that. We want to give the tools to the teachers and students now And we have good people. They just need, let's keep giving them more what they need to get to success.
Sure. Along with academic excellence comes, we've heard a lot about personal excellence and making sure that students feel equal and included, which leads us to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
So I think that Scituate Public Schools is really at the forefront of this initiative. I mean, hiring Jamil Adams, first director, and became really a model for other school districts. However, not everyone considered this an initiative. They considered it a movement, a very liberal left-wing movement. Let me just ask you this. Do you think DEI belongs in the Scituate Public Schools?
Yes. You might have seen me smile because, it's funny hearing, I grew up in a family that my mom would just be laughing to have me associated with being liberal because, it's just different from the house that I grew up in drastically. So I think she would be laughing at that comment. But, you don't know. So when you're in school committee, our charge is to be, it's in our policy. It's school committee member ethics, BCA, accept the office as a committee member as a means of unselfish service with no intent to play politics in any sense of the word or to benefit personally from his or her committee activities. We don't declare what party we are affiliated with, because we're here to serve all students. At the end of the day, it's about the kids here, and it's not about personal beliefs in that way. So do I believe that DEI belongs at Scituate Public Schools? Yes, 100%. First of all, it's part of the standards. Diversity is taught as part of the standards all the way through K to 12. It starts, we teach about community and that there are different people in our community and they all have a different role, and you learn about inclusivity, and the word diversity is right in the standards. For example, if you're looking at first grade, they teach concepts of unity and diversity and respect for self that shape life in the U.S. at a developmentally, appropriate level. It's good leadership. And then, it's built upon throughout the curriculum, social studies and such, that, in 8th grade, the standard is similar, but cognitively a little bit more advanced. So we're looking to analyze how motives affect the way people share information. So interestingly enough, social media, how those trends kind of, how that influences and shapes people's opinions. So, getting our students to think about the world as, multifaceted, multicultural is part of the DESE standards already. So it's infused in our curriculum. So that, whether I think it belongs there or not, I absolutely do. And it's happening already, and even I remember as a kid, it's happening forever in terms of that level of work. I think when you get into the more, the deeper DEI, as you mentioned with Jamil Adams, a little bit more proactive kind of work. Yes, the reasoning behind some of that, that work, Scituate. In every town, there's no perfect place. I wish there was, but we've had a lot of, Scituate in particular, for whatever reason, has had a lot of incidents. Maybe everybody's had the same amount, and Scituate students feel more comfortable, and brave to share them, and to try to make change. Maybe that's why. But we've had multitude of incidents involving homophobia, racism, Asian hate in our school, just comments and incidents, and social media. We had Zoom, Google Classroom incidents. There have been incidents at sporting events and in the hallways. Scituate was on the local news for having such events happening. So we really were on a public trajectory that we were kind of earning not a great reputation. And that's a distraction from learning, and it has a great social emotional impact on all students and staff, and it was significant. There was a lot of emails, and some of them, honest to God, it brought me to tears. Some of the things that people shared, that they were just advocating for their children to have a good day at school. Sure. And be able to go in and not feel, harmed and unsafe and victimized. You can't help but that's really, it's just unacceptable at the end of the day. So there was big reviews of, from our role, again, policies, procedures, what is my role as a school committee member to ensure that all kids are receiving equal education here. So, I'm looking at policies, we're looking at practices and policies and, shifting to restorative justice, because with that became, let's not be so punitive, these are kids, like everybody, I always look back at my own kids, I'm like, could my kid do something or say, like, could this be, could I be on that side of this? Why wouldn't I? My kids are kids, like they see stuff, they are on social media, they take a risk at this, this is cool, this is, I'm gonna be, whatever, it's kids. So we don't wanna be punitive, we wanna be restorative, educational, like this is the time to learn these things properly, so they are good citizens out in the world. And, when you look at the notion of, systemic racism, I know that is the kind of crux of where some of this tension started. As you had mentioned that, is this a kind of a movement versus us bringing Jamil Adams in to kind of have another professional on staff that can handle these types of incidents. So when we brought Jamil Adams on, there had already been kind of some families and community members who had said, wouldn't it be great if we had somebody on staff that, was an expert in these things, that knew how to help us all. Kids were asking for help, students are so insightful. They were asking for help for teachers so that when they asked the teacher a question that was maybe uncomfortable or, difficult, that the teachers were prepared to answer those questions and help on these issues, because they want to have these conversations. And teachers were asking for professional development. And up until that point, PD is interesting. You have, if you have a new math program, you might have PD around that. If you don't have a new math program, you're going to have PD around other things. So, and not everybody needs PD for math. We talk about, but DEI, that's something that our entire staff would benefit from. So those kinds of workshops that took place, and we did have a consultant come in at one point to try to help and get staff and faculty the professional development they needed to talk about these issues with students and families. And that felt, from my seat as a school committee member, and working in a school, sometimes these professional developments are amazing. You're bringing in great people to do this work. You go to this workshop, you get all excited. I'll go to like a workshop on anxiety or something as an adjustment counselor. I'm jazzed up. I love it. I'm so excited. This is amazing stuff. And then, real life happens. 2 weeks go by. You've got your notes from it. I'm going to do all these things, and you want to do 10 things, and maybe you get like 1 or 2 out of it at the end of the day that you can actually put into practice. So I think that's the stuff that happens with PD around, these kinds of topics. Wow, that was great. I feel energized. I feel, like I'm going to reach my students. We're gonna do this. We're gonna make change. And then you're like, oh no, I'm going to give a math test tomorrow. Like that's what I'm going to do. So they're one-offs in a sense. So you're not getting that consistent, Scituate-focused attention to these kinds of issues that were pervasive into our, the daily climate at Scituate Public Schools. So that's why I was on board for hiring Jamil Adams and doing this deeper sort of DEI Scituate-specific work. And I will mention too that, being a school committee member, we're part of the Mass Association of School Committees, and there's a really nice listserv email that people can ask policy questions and procedural stuff, and we can kind of get feedback from other school committee members around the state. And when we were, excuse me, I know, I'm keeping going on and on. when we look at, we kind of can glance at these emails and see what's going on in other cities and towns and what questions other people have. Oh, have you have a policy around this? Oh, sure, we use that. Okay, so it's kind of just a feedback, kind of a group. So MASC put out in response to the national climate and anti-racism recommended anti-racism statement for school committees. And we were already having these conversations in Scituate because of all this stuff that was going on. Then when that happened, we got sort of, here's the recommendation, here's a statement you can put out, it's already written for you, you can just click yes, you just approve it at your meeting, here it is right here. School committee anti-racism resolution. And I don't know, something clicked in me to say, hold on, because I didn't want us to have this knee-jerk reaction to racism in Scituate. I just felt like we could do better. Like, maybe this was appropriate. Maybe at the end of the day, exactly how MASC had it written for us, fine. But I didn't think that the 5 of us on school committee should be the only voices, even though this was a school committee resolution. I just felt like it wasn't our issue to handle a dictate alone, in a sense, like even to make a statement. I just didn't feel like it. I felt like it was almost the antithesis of that, us being like, sure, yes. And there were over 75 towns that did click yes and just read the statement, approved it, it went into their minutes, etc. Not every town published that information on their website. So my opponent says on his website that, Scituate's the only town that put out a statement of, that signed this type of a statement. Sure. That is not true.
Let's stop real quick. Let's talk about this systemic racism. Now,
yes.
So for individuals that are not familiar, it's this idea that there are elements in place in systems that create disadvantages for minorities, Black
Correct.
Americans, and this started within the justice system really, and sort of course spread into other institutions and businesses looking at their practices.
Right.
This includes that Scituate School Committee,
Sure.
and this statement you're referring to came in October of 2020. When did you put that out? And it included, yes. And the statement was there, and the line that created a little controversy was this: we commit, quote, we commit to proactively uprooting the systemic racism that currently exists in Scituate Public Schools.
Yes.
So as you know, one of my questions is going to be, and I shouldn't even have to ask this because your signature is on that statement.
Yes, it is.
And so I shouldn't have to ask you if you believe systemic racism exists here in Scituate Public Schools, but I'm going to,
Sure.
Because 8 months after October 2020, systemic racism came up again in a public comment in a school committee meeting. Mm-hmm. While that was going on, you had a text exchange with
Yes.
other school committee members. Your opponent was able to acquire that text exchange. Mm-hmm. He put parts of that text on his website that seemed to indicate you and the committee did not know what you were voting on or had made a mistake. Do you want to respond to that text exchange?
I would be happy to. So, as I was saying sort of originally with this statement, so there's 2 pieces to this. One of them is this MASC kind of generated school committee anti-racism resolution. The second piece is the anti-racism, so I'm sorry, see, even I'm mixing it up right now. We have the anti-racism statement that was put out by the school committee, and we have the anti-racism resolution that is a district kind of endeavor and statement as a whole. So the statement was put out by the 5 of us in response to this MASC sort of boilerplate, if you will, statement that came out from MASC that was like, this is what we recommend. School committees were asking for this. Everybody wanted this, something that they could say, something that they could put out to constituents as school committees to kind of assert how they felt on the issue. So, as I said, over 75 towns, MASC-affiliated towns in Massachusetts, put out this school committee statement on anti-racism. including Hingham locally, Norwell. They didn't post them on their website, so if you go and you look, you know, Hingham and Norwell and Hull, Bridgewater, they don't have them linked on their website, but at some point they approved this statement, just as we did, in a school committee meeting and signed, you know, their own names to it. So when we did this, we weren't alone. It was in conjunction with other Mass districts, and it does say, as you said, you know, about anti-racism and the systemic structure of that currently exists in Scituate Public Schools. So, is Scituate Public Schools systemically racist, or was it? I think for me, you know, as you said, when we look at systemic racism, we're looking to see if there are constructs, procedures, and processes in place that disadvantage minority groups. You know, it's to keep your eye on the ball. You know, as I kind of said with our academic excellence question, you know, if kids aren't feeling safe, if there are measures or pieces of this system that are holding people back, that are not creating equal opportunity, it's a system problem, and it needs to be fixed. So when we look at Scituate Public Schools, can I point to an example where the system is disadvantaging minority groups? And I can, because when we brought on our fantastic new director of special education, she brought to light, and it was mentioned and fully explained in a school committee meeting, that we were flagged as a district for over-identifying black students as having a communication disability. And pardon me for reading off my notes because I don't want to get this wrong. It's really important. The last year, we did a lot of training. So this would be this past year, so I would call that 2021. We did a lot of training sponsored by DESE, along with other districts such as Marblehead and Weston, that were identified as having, quote, significant disproportionality. So that's a problem in our system that needs to be rectified. The school year, this school, and it was changed, and we looked at those procedures and how kids were identified. And this school year, we were notified that we were no longer disproportionate. And these kinds of labels are really important for children so that they're getting the supports and services that they do need. It guides the intervention. So that could mean the difference for a student of just getting daily specialized reading instruction in a classroom or small group pullout, or just getting a speech and language session a few times per week. So, you know, it's a massive system. So there can always be pieces that need to be looked at. It's about being cognizant that these things could happen and not denying that they could. Because when we're not acknowledging that they are there or could potentially be there, we're not servicing, we're not caring for kids. And nobody's getting, that's unacceptable to me as a school committee member, as a mental health professional, and as a mom, as a community member. That's a bottom line for me. You know, I would do anything I could to not have a child be disserviced in that way. So yes, that's an example of an instance where you could say, you know, we're not trying to say people are purposely or cognizantly, that they're, you know, fully purposely trying to disadvantage anybody. It's just a nature of the size of this machine, and that there can be cracks, and we have to have a bottom line, and we have to have safety nets, and we need to fix it and acknowledge it. And it's really important, and I'm really proud of Scituate, this district, for doing that work and for having hard conversations. They continue, you know, there's no end to it, you know, it's just the way it is. So it's not trying to push or, you know, take away anything from anybody else. It's trying to elevate our schools to be places for all students, to have equal opportunities. You know, that's what it's about at the end of the day. And, you know, I'm happy to talk about the text messages a little bit more. So that text message was between myself and Mike Long. You had said, like, oh, that was a snippet of it. That's it. That's the whole whole text exchange. So when we have school committee meetings, or even outside of school committee meetings. You know, it's ironic because our current committee, I feel, is so, we actually have a very high ethical standard, and because of the sort of Mass General Law, if we are having any kind of communications with more than 2 school committee members at a time, that's a violation of open meeting law. So we don't. And it's hard because you realize how it jams up communication sometimes. Like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just meet for coffee and talk about anything? You know, the 5 of us, three of us, 4 of us. We can't, because that triggers it being a meeting, and that's a violation. So we don't. But, you know, these laws were written prior to social media, prior to texting, and there's no kind of neat and easy way that it ever fits. So legally, you know, there are conversations we've had with district lawyers and things about like how this stuff works, and you know, they say don't do it, don't communicate that way, you know, because of reasons like this, you know. But it's really tough when you're trying to communicate, and how are we, you know, then we go to a public meeting and we look all disjointed because, you know, and they're like, well, haven't you guys talked about this? People will say, like, no, we don't. We can't. It's a violation of open meeting law. We don't. You know, we can talk one-on-one, we can have a phone call, those kinds of things, and we can text. I mean, clearly, you know, it's not illegal, if you will, to text each other, certainly not one-on-one. But it's tough. Like, and I don't think people realize the restrictions that are there, obviously, to protect us from having these like side conversations without the public involved. But at the same time, it kind of restricts our flow of, like, you know, especially with the pandemic, not meeting in person. You look at Superintendent Burkhead, he hadn't even met us all, you know, at all in person. And Peter Gates is going to be mad at me for mentioning this, but we joke about it all the time, that we had gone to, I think it was one of the town meetings, the one that took place out on the high school football field, and everybody was in masks outside, and he thought Superintendent Burkhead was somebody else, or it was like, you know, because we were all masked. And you know, I'll leave it at that because I don't want to embarrass Peter. But you know, it was funny, and you know, but it was just a piece of the puzzle to this pandemic stuff. So, you know, it's hard being a school committee member. It's tough with that stuff, and we, you know, we're doing our best, honestly. So when that happened, Mike and I, you know, Mike's trying to run a meeting on a Zoom. You know, it's really tough. You don't know what people are going to ask. It's nerve-wracking sometimes, you know, and you had mentioned my kids are on the Zooms all the time. Like, at that one, I was sitting at my kitchen table. There was, like, my husband's over here. Like, there's meatballs you know, it's very distracting. I don't have an office in my house. Like, you know, I have school committee meetings in my bedroom sometimes. I don't know if anyone can notice it. I try to be professional. It's like a chair. But it's really tricky. So when that happened, you know, Mike and I, you know, were like, oh my goodness, like, okay. And as I kind of flubbled before, you know, we had this school committee anti-racism statement, and then we had the Scituate Public Schools anti-racism resolution. And my opponent, who happened to be the one speaking about that, he was referring to one or the other and back and forth. And I was like, I don't, you know, real-time confusing. And that's when Mike was like, you know, do we say that? What is it? Because in our anti-racism resolution that was created in a different way, so like the statement was, you know, a mask-generated sort of document. The resolution came about a different way, and our resolution was formed with a group of over 60 individuals. We sort of looked at it from, again, like that was the piece that when I said prior, you know, we don't want to just have this knee-jerk reaction and put out a blanket, you know, policy or like, you know, any kind of resolution for the district, just the 5 of us. Like, that doesn't seem right for the 5 of us to do that. We need to include all voices, you know, we need to include voices of people that have been, you know, of our minority voices in our community. Like, why are the 5 of us, you know, putting out an anti-racism resolution without elevating voices of those that have not been treated equally. That's sort of the antithesis of this to me. So there was a school committee member in that MASC listserv group from Newton, and she, at the time, MASC was taking data on which districts had passed anti-racism resolutions. And again, just to be clear, like that's separate from the statement. The statement is the one that says that we have we uproot the systemic racism. Now we're kind of moving on to the resolution, anti-racism resolution. So this representative from Newton said Newton is not going to pass that. We're not. So every other district, we're going to do it. Us, yes, 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 yes. And Newton said no, we're not doing it. And I'm like, oh. Why? That's weird. Like, what are they? You know, they don't want to do this. The Newton, huge. Like, what's going on? So, I reached out to her because, you know, I'm a talker. I want to communicate with people at all times, and so I reached out to her, and I said, hey, you know, I'm in Scituate. We're doing all this work. Why did you guys opt out of the anti-racism resolution? And she said, oh, well, we have a DEI director, and you know, we've been working on this for a long time, and we just want to do something Newton specific, and he's got ideas, and we're handling it this way. This is what Newton needs. And I'm like, oh, well, I like that. And because I want to do what Scituate needs. And knowing that we've had all these issues happen, and we've had some workshops, but we're still not hitting the target here. It just wasn't that, and that's not my opinion. That's what emails were saying. That's what parents and students and teachers were saying. That's from feedback, from listening to people, from listening to voices. So that's when I went to administration and school committee members, and we're like, we need to form a subcommittee here. You know, we need to really dig into this. We need something to fit our needs in Scituate, and everybody was on board. So that's how we had the two pieces. And I think there was when Mike was like, we don't say that, and then I was like, no, we don't. Because, you know, I thought we had moved. I didn't realize we were talking about the statement that had been approved, with the school committee statement. I thought we were still kind of working off this anti-racism resolution piece because during those subcommittee meetings, my opponent was very upset about the word anti-racism and how it was being used, and that was voiced in sort of breakout rooms. And to be honest, we received emails from very, very upset members of the community that were a part of that group. It was over 60 people, and the conversations that took place hurt people of color in the group. And, you know, they reached out and were very, very, very upset by some of the comments that took place and some of the rationale in some of those breakout groups. So there was a lot of tension within that group. And some people had posted some recommended readings. The group was not a book study. We weren't there to look at texts or anything like that. And the readings that were put up were very much in the category of proactively looking at anti-racism. And my opponent and others wanted to look at it from maybe a different lens. And members of our community, members of the BIPOC community in this group were saying, we don't want to listen to the texts here, like either side of the text, we want to listen to the voices in our community, the representation on our committee here, our subcommittee, that have experienced this racism and homophobia. Those are the voices we want to listen to. And they're telling us that this is important, that we tackle this, that we take it head on and we fix it to make the experience better for all students in the schools. And my opponent decided to have separate conversations with a few members of this group, none of which were representatives of any kind of disadvantaged minority groups within our community. Nobody from the Black community, Scituate Public Schools community, was in that group, and they said, oh, we came up with a version of this anti-racism resolution, and here it is. And it did take out the words anti-racism, and The rest of the group didn't feel that that was what the purpose of this was, the subcommittee. We were here to make a statement. We were here to make change. And we didn't want to go light on it. We wanted to go strong. And that was it. That was the initial sort of tension that led to, and then we had to dissolve the subcommittee because it wasn't neat. Once we came up with a statement, that was it. I don't want to say that, there were people there was a few members of that group that really didn't want it to say anti-racist. Right. The majority of the group did, especially voices of folks that were people of color that were in the group. So our superintendent supported it, and it went forward. So when that text message exchange happened, there was multiple documents, and I said in that meeting, okay, let me just go and make sure, let me clear, I don't want to misspeak. Let me go back and look at this. Mm-hmm. And I did, and we were asked, we listened, we heard the desire from a small group to revisit it, take it down, pull it back, and our school committee, the five of us agreed, no, that we will hold strong. We want to be an anti-racist. This statement was made during that particular time, and it was valid. And we still want to make sure that we're holding up and doing right by our students and families.
Got it. Let's talk quickly about sex education. When it comes to sexual orientation, gender identity, should that be taught in Scituate Public Schools, and if yes, what grade?
Yep. So when we look at that subject matter, it's something that's already in the standards. It's something that's already being, I did bring that all with me. Something that we're already discussing in schools, mm-hmm. obviously. Oh, I don't need it. So that stuff happened. So when we talk about sex education and such, in about fifth grade, the standards say by fifth grade, this is what students should be aware of. Then it's by eighth grade, this is what students should be aware of. Then it's by 12th grade, this is what students should know. And it's, again, set by DESE. There's a panel of doctors and school nurses and teachers, physical education teachers, because this is all health curriculum as well. And that panel has, in fact, it's from 1999, and there was a review in place. So, at some point, but these things get looked at to make sure that it's still, still the standards. And so, in fifth grade, they start to learn about those things, and it's all developmentally appropriate. They learn about body systems, parts of the body, and they are exposed to definitions, and start talking about sex education. It's done with the school nurse and the PE health teacher. It's notices go home. You can opt out if you're not comfortable with it, and conversations are encouraged to be had with the schools. It's a partnership for sure, and if anyone's not comfortable with that at any time, they should be reaching out and asking for whatever they need.
Got it. Let's shift gears completely. Let's jump to the budget. Okay. You've been through, 4 budget cycles at this point? As you know, that budget, it's a beast. There is a lot going on. The school budget is unbelievable. Down to the amount of pencils that are purchased. So I'm not going to ask you for priorities. What I want to know is when you are presented with the budget, how do you approach it? Do you go front to back? Do you kind of zero in on specific areas? Walk me through that. Right.
I don't want to forget this, though. I will give my budget answer, but I just need to go back to the text messages one more time.
Sure, absolutely.
So those text messages, just to kind of close this out, how did they get, how did the community members get our text messages? I guess is probably a question that would be lingering. So those were obtained through usage of the Freedom of Information Act requests, because anyone can do that at any time. All of our emails and texts and communications are considered public record. That was difficult for me because that's my personal cell phone. we're elected officials, but I don't know. As a school committee member, it's hard to see. I don't see myself as like a political entity or like a politician or anything. So that, as well as 33 other requests, were made to the district during that summer, and it weighed extremely heavy on the district because there's time constraints with them. You need to reply. The law says that you need to do certain things and reply in a certain amount of time. So when Mr. Taft and associates requested these text messages between school committee members and Superintendent Burkhead and each other, and then, additionally between community members, you're thinking like, all right, I text my mom, like, are you gonna pull those off my phone? Like, I text my friends, they help me with the kids when, I'm on these meetings, picking up my son from baseball. It feels like a violation. I understand that it's the law, but for me, it would have been nice to have had a conversation first with somebody before they go to that extreme to get my texts and documents. Documents were requested about MATCO students, information about affinity groups. This, again, Heidi Driscoll was being onboarded at the time. The district central office spent the majority of their time on these requests. At the end of the day, there was nothing fruitful that came out of the requests. They were asking for I don't know what the goal was, really. There was professional development requests. There was one put in for Superintendent Burkhead's email address because it was assumed that he was B for Bill instead of W for William. I mean, I don't know that that's exactly, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, that's not what the purpose of that Freedom of Information Act is. It was tough because it was a lot to handle sort of in that moment. But, at the end of the day, there was really nothing that seemed relevant to anything that was happening in our district, that we weren't up to no good, I guess. I don't know what the goal of it was. I really honestly don't. But community members should know that costs the district valuable time. It was certainly taking up multiple people's full-time job time, so that it was taking them away from work that could have been done to increase academic excellence. And we were working on things about learning loss in the district, and that derailed some of that for that entire summer. Another request came in from a group called Judicial Watch out of Washington, D.C., looking for information about METCO. It doesn't seem, it was a lot for the district to deal with, and it cost time. And, we need to go through those things. They did need to go, lawyers, we had, that it costs money. The district had to go through those things and redact any personal information. Hundreds and hundreds of documents with if you're looking for the word keywords and the word group comes up, you might have 600 documents with that word. You have to go through and make sure no kids' personal information, kids in special education. It was a lot of work. It was all for absolutely nothing, because nothing was gained except maybe knowing the cost of some professional development and being able to say, okay, the district didn't do any STEM professional development under those keywords, or it's not as if STEM teachers didn't get PD or aren't doing earning PDPs in their craft subject matter. So that's the full story of that, and how there was never any emails to me asking to get my views or opinions on anti-racism, ever. And I am very open to all conversations all the time with anyone, as everybody knows. So,
Good.
I'll leave it at that.
There you go. Back to budget.
Sorry.
Budget. How do you approach it? How do you approach budget?
Yeah. So I'm always looking at like class size and keeping those class size ratios low. It's a big concern sort of for me to have that low class sizes. So when we look at the budget, I'm looking at, of course, the majority of our budget is staffing. So I look at positions. Are we lacking in any positions that we need to fund? Specifically, do we need more counselors? Do we need more? One time we were looking at, what's the ratio of student to staff member? I believe it's like 250 to 1 for like a school counselor. So are we meeting those requirements is important for me. Are we meeting the requirements for like our school nurse ratios and things like that per student? Because these folks take on really high student loads, and they need to have what they need to see those students. So I look at those sorts of things. I'm looking at maintenance, like this building maintenance stuff was really important that we establish a line item for building maintenance, which was awesome. We were able to do that to bring accountability to some of the maintenance items that so people can see, because obviously we're looking to build a new school. We need to also look at maintaining what we already have. We just want to be fiscally responsible and good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. And eliminating fees has been really massive for us. Eliminating the kindergarten fee up to $4,000 per family, eliminating, not parking, the athletic fees for families up to $900 was big. Hopefully we can maybe eliminate parking fees in the future, things like that. So that's what I look at for budget personally.
You brought this up a little bit. I want to go back to facility and the maintenance line. I don't know for sure if that falls under facilities. I'm not sure, but I do know the percentage of facilities, it was like 3.74% of that budget goes to that. And I bring up facilities because, as you've said, the school administration is pushing hard for a new elementary school.
Right.
They want to combine Hatherley and Cushing.
Right.
Are you in support of that?
Absolutely. I'm a Cushing parent. So yes, we're in the process. So we've, Dr. Dutch has been phenomenal for us in terms of financial transparency and documentation. We're ahead of the game. We're ahead of the process, I should say, in terms of submitting what the MSBA wants and requires for us to to get that reimbursement back from them for building. We're looking at, quite the price tag on everything in life right now, including building schools. So yes, so Cushing and Hatherley are old. They are not the best layouts for 21st century learning. It's not conducive to learning to have a gymnasium and have classrooms off of that and have all of that going on at the same time. So yes, I'm fully in support of building, and I'm in sort of combining the two, and that's the fiscally responsible thing to do. We looked deeply into this, as I said, way back in my statement about myself and being on that subcommittee that looked at the school building configurations. It was looked into quite extensively. We went to other towns, we did these site visits, we gathered information, we did research on what the benefits are of certain schools setups, and those buildings are aged to the point where we did consider some more upgrades and overhauls in there versus tear down kind of stuff, and it was still millions of dollars. And at the end of the day, it was like the same structure. Like I mentioned, having the gym with the classrooms off of it isn't great at all. So we were going to be able to do some upgrades for millions and millions of dollars, but not get, at the end of the day, what would be the best learning environments for kids.
When Superintendent Burkhead and Dr. Dutch went before the Select Board and presented this plan,
yes.
Select Board member Andrew Goodrich was very critical of this. And when it came to the maintenance of the two schools, saying, look, if you can't take care of the facilities in these two schools,
yep.
why should we approve building a new one?
Right.
What do you think about that?
Hey, he's not wrong. I think, if we can't maintain these buildings, what gives us, why should we get new ones? There's a historical component to that, I suppose, before any of the current select board even, and in the current school committee, and going back to what's the best, how do we maintain these buildings? And I think another accomplishment that I've been happy to be a part of on our school committee is improving our working relationship with our select board, because while we don't do this, we don't work together on a lot, all of a sudden, sometimes we do. And one of these things is building maintenance because, right now, Scituate Public Schools, we're in charge of the interior maintenance of these buildings. The town is responsible for the exterior maintenance of these buildings. And, why? And something really neat for me was and we're not even done with this work yet, is being a part of the town charter review and it was one of the reasons I wanted to be on that subcommittee, is that why? Why is the school in charge of interior? And we're relying on the town who has, their own set of responsibilities, and they also have to take care of the exterior of our school buildings. So, and when, school personnel and school maintenance personnel are on the grounds, is that the best method? And we really dug into this on this subcommittee with, representation from our town. And we got the historical, I think it's always important to have that sort of historical context of why is it this way? We are not the first people to ask these questions probably, I always have that in my head, and respect that historical perspective. So it was brought up that, hey, these FYI, the schools used to be in charge of that, and there was a breakdown there, and it wasn't manageable. Okay, well, we didn't know that. So what can we do to make it better? And I think our relationship with the select board has been great because they do care very much about our schools, and they want to see, they understand the value of, of good schools in our town, and want us to be successful. And we've had the opportunity to kind of talk about, okay, especially even during the pandemic, we've worked a lot well in tandem with pandemic issues. So we're saying all right, so how can we, if we're going to keep the maintenance piece interior for us and exterior for them, what's the disconnect? Why are, me as a parent, why am I there ripping out poison ivy, during the start of school, and, that sort of a thing? Why are the window panes rotting out of the windows at Cushing? It's the communication piece we discovered, and there's no it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault, it's communication at some level. So, all right, so we pull in Superintendent Burkhead, we pull in Dr. Dutch, we pull in the town, and we're all how do we make this better? And, it was a communication piece between Dr. Dutch's sort of side and the maintenance personnel, and then going over to the town more, and making sure that we have this very solid, hey, this is happening, we need this stuff, a plow hit a curb, can we fix, whatever it is. So really working on that relationship is something that we value and we want to. When select board member Goodrich, he's right, look at what we have, how do we deserve to, we want to give you money, what are you going to do with what, your new building is? So establishing that line item to really be clear about here's what we're doing every year, because, the Gates Schools is new, we don't want to see that deteriorate. Here's what we do every year that is going to be building maintenance in our own budget. Here's what the school can do and we can take responsibility for.
Sure.
So I think that's helpful.
Good. You mentioned communication there a little bit, and as we know in every meeting, on every website, transparency is the word of the year,
Correct.
if you will.
Yeah.
When we think about communications in the Scituate Public Schools administration, how do you think they're doing communicating with parents, teachers, students?
Sure. I think we're making some there's forward motion on it. I think it could be different elements that I'd like to see done better. I think, when you look at communications from, what's the comparison? Is it the comparison to the previous administration's communication levels? Then it's leaps and bounds. I find Superintendent Burkhead's Thursday thoughts to be full of relevant information, easy to understand. Communications from the principals with their weekly communications are great. There's opportunities, coffee with, with the principals, and you can go in with Ryan Beatty, you can go in with Lisa McGuire. There's certainly a more of an open door concept, I feel, and it's tough because the pandemic obviously kind of skewed some of that from happening. But I do think that those pieces are definitely going in the right direction. I think there's just more opportunities for parents to come in. Parents can come back into the classrooms and volunteer and things like that. So I think that opens up those communication lines. You know, I know that Superintendent Burkhead very much wants, you know, Scituate Public Schools to be the home away from home, and values communication very greatly. I think that right now we have, you know, some communication could be stronger, I think, on certain things, certain issues that seem to not be able to be clarified. I can give an example on enrollment. You know, Superintendent Burkhead gave a presentation about enrollment at the last school committee meeting, you know, but yet there's this continued conversation about how people are leaving Scituate Public Schools in droves. That's absolutely not true. That is not what the actual numbers say at all. You know, we had an enrollment drop, but that was because of birth rates, and we studied that very closely with looking to build a new school, because the MSBA is not going to approve a school that holds 800 kids if we only have 600. We're wasting money, and that doesn't make sense financially. So we know what the enrollment is down to the student, and what we do see is what we knew was happening, because we had these bubble grades that were a little bit bigger, and those grades, we've tracked them since 2000, 2002, and now they're 18 and they're graduating, and that accounts for this slope of students declining. And with that, there isn't as many kids being born. The class sizes are smaller coming in, and we've tracked that bubble because it's affected class sizes, because if that class is going into 4th grade, and they need 4 teachers in 4th grade because they have 60 kids, if you want to do like 15s, the one behind them only has 55 kids. So do we need 4 teachers behind? So what happens with that 4th teacher? Do they follow? Do they teach 4th grade, then 5th grade? That, you know, so that's something that the district's been watching and following while this bubble kind of goes on. That being said, our numbers are actually up in terms of distribution. So out of the current total of students enrolled in Scituate Public Schools, or I should say, out of the current total school-aged kids in Scituate, more families are choosing to send their children to Scituate Public Schools than to homeschool or private. That number has decreased ever so slightly. I mean, if you really look at it, it's pretty consistent, but by percentage, it's decreased by like 2% over the last 5 years. So, you know, of the total, we have a higher number of people enrolling in SPS than we have, you know. So, again, statistics and data, but that's it. There's a reduction in homeschool and private school percentages. There are not families leaving in droves. There's certainly people that are leaving and choosing, you know, private or homeschool, and that's to be respected, and they have their own reasons, and that's great. That's okay. That's the way it is. But when Superintendent Burkhead once made a comment about, you know, he wants to talk to those people and say, hey, you know, I'm curious what influenced your decision, you know, because like I said about, you know, academic excellence, it's like we don't want to have, this wouldn't be, you know, exactly falling through the cracks, but it's almost like we want to have you know, we want to communicate. We want to know why these things are happening. Like, is it family tradition that you go to, you know, BC High, and that's that? Yeah. You know, or is it something else? What can we do better? So it's really coming from a positive place, and what can we do better? And the narrative that it's a negative trend and, oh, you know, people are leaving in droves in the school system, you know, I don't hear I haven't heard one singular positive anything from my opponent about this school system. And, you know, I'm a parent of 4 kids in this district, and they're working their tails off, and their teachers are as well. And, you know, the school committee is, and the administration is, and there's so much great positive things happening with a nod to the fact that we can always be improving. It's a little disheartening, to be honest.
Back to communication real quick. Scituate loves to communicate through Facebook.
Yes.
The school administration has opted not to have a Facebook page. Good choice, bad choice?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good choice because you know, when you engage in social media, the tone can be lost, the messaging can be lost. You know, it's open to of emotion. So I don't think it's, there's so many different ways that you can communicate with parents and, you know, and teachers and such. I don't think that social media is a very appropriate place for the district to really be. And you're still going to miss people, you know, it's like posts get lost and the algorithms are what they are. But I just don't think, it's necessary to, you know, to use social media as a school district to communicate, you know, what we need to get out to parents.
We've talked about a lot today. At the end of the day, your main mission as a school committee member is that well-being of the students.
Yes.
So we cannot do this interview without some student voices. I'm going to give you 2 questions. We're going to start elementary school. Ready?
Ready.
Hi, I'm a 5th grader, Mason McCauley from Cushing Elementary, and I would like to know who your favorite teacher is.
It was supposed to be who's your favorite elementary school teacher, but who, I don't even care. Just tell me, who's one of your favorite teachers?
Oh my gosh, how are you going to make me pick just one?
Give us a couple then.
Gosh, my favorite teacher. That's not fair, Mason. Okay, so, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can answer that. You know, I love, all the teachers are great. You know, everybody's bringing their own unique personalities to the job. My kids have all had fabulous teachers. They've had teachers that they haven't connected well with. You know, this isn't, you know, all roses here. You know, like personalities clash and then personalities connect.
But you personally, like when you were in elementary school, who was one of your favorite elementary school teachers?
Oh my gosh, I thought we were I was like, you're asking me about Scituate Public Schools teachers and you want me to name who's my favorite? I can't pick one of them.
When you were in elementary school, who was one of your favorite teachers?
Oh boy. So my favorite teacher was Mrs. Smith. And she was my teacher in high school, and she taught these really, so I actually have some vocational school experience, and because in Peabody, the Voc is, it's cool because it's attached to the high school. So we have opportunities to take some vocational classes, and because it's right there. So it was really neat, and we did marketing classes, and she taught these fun kind of fashion marketing classes, and my friends and I loved her because she was very calm. She was kind of had a great rapport with kids. She let us, we could go there and get away from sort of the structure of you know, traditional classrooms. It was like tables and not desks, and I really liked that. She supported us. We talked about you know, what the curriculum materials. Obviously, we did projects, which was great. But we asked her personal questions. Like she helped us with, you know, social emotional issues. You know, now that I think about it, you know, so if we were having a rough day, she would ask us, "What's going on?" You know, like we felt free and safe in that room to talk about something that happened at lunch, and she would offer advice. You know, it was a place that you could be yourself. You didn't have to, you know, there was no pressure, sort of a thing. So she was an awesome, almost like a guidance role. But I really loved her, and her demeanor was calm, and she supported us, and we learned a lot from her. She ran our DECA. I was a DECA member as well, and I loved going to those DECA competitions. We went on field trips. We went to New York City and looked at like all different industries and fashion merchandising, and so she was my favorite teacher, and still is, because I still she's still there.
Nice. Let's get a teen voice in there. Here you go.
Hi, my name's Sean Patrick. I'm a junior at Scituate High School, and my question to the candidate is, what was your best and worst subject in high school?
That's
best
easy.
and worst. As I saw the kid. Oh, go.
Math.
Best or worst?
Worst. Very worst math. You know, to be honest, so when I was in 6th grade, I was very young for my grade and the oldest child in my family, and an innocent kid, like you know, it just is what it is. And, Peabody is not like Scituate. It's way bigger and it's more intimidating. There are 9 elementary schools, and then we all come to the Higgins Middle School. And for me, it was really intimidating, and a lot for me. And I was really an academic kid, but I don't know. I got into sixth grade, and I don't know what happened. And I say this to my own kids, but I lost my confidence in myself in math, and I didn't feel supported in regaining that at all. So when I look at myself now and I'm helping my 7th grader with math, I'm proud of myself because I can hold my own and I've helped him a lot. But when I reflect upon my own experience as a math student, I didn't have it. I had no confidence in myself and my skills at all. And as a result, when you don't feel great about it and you're 12, 13, 14, you're like, well, I'm not good at this. Otherwise known as, then I'm not going to like it. I don't like math. So then once you're doing those self-fulfilling prophecies, they kick in, Yeah. So I didn't enjoy math. I did everything I could to avoid it, to be honest. And it was weird because I definitely had the ability, and I would somehow get myself in high school into decent level calculus and things. And then at the end of it, I remember being a senior, and I went to my guidance counselor and I was like, I don't want to be in this class anymore. Put me in, the other math. And they were like, okay, sure, whatever. And I went into general math, whatever it was called, because I just didn't believe in myself and my skills. And, so I opted out. But I do try to tell my son that, my 5th grader, because he's not confident in his math skills right now. And I'm like, you can do it. Try to be positive with him and get him support.
Best class, best subject.
My best subject? Well, okay, so my best, I love...
Don't say everything.
No, I'm just trying to choose between 2. Okay. So I was really good at my English classes. I loved AP English and that sort of a thing in terms of, grades and capabilities. But I really loved, we took a class in 10th grade, and it's a history class. And growing up in Peabody, right next to Salem, I'm thoroughly versed in the Salem history and, Salem witches and all of that sort of early days history. And I love it. I think it's fascinating. And my favorite class in high school, we got to go out and we were to, go to Salem and parts of Peabody and Danvers and go to these grave sites and these really cool, historical locations, and go down the Salem shipyard and this and that, and take pictures of ourselves. And we really learned about those pieces of history. And I loved that class. And I just have really fond memories of, it was 10th grade, so some of my friends had their licenses. And so we were out and, buzzing around looking at really cool historical pieces of our town and our neighboring town. And
Great.
I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Great. Good. Well done. Well done. Hey, listen, one more time. Tell voters why they should vote for you on May 21st.
Absolutely. So, I'm not here for the social issues of the day. I am here for students. I believe all kids deserve to have a safe and equal opportunity at Scituate Public Schools. My experience and my record kind of speak for themselves. I have experience with budgets, hiring exceptional leaders. I have respect for teachers, and I have respect for parents. And I've always listened to parents. And having 4 kids in the district, I understand various sort of situations that can occur for our kids through their academic career. I understand contracts. I have my own. I have a contract as a teacher, and I'm familiar with the contract process. And something I didn't touch on a lot, but is extremely important, is special education. I'm a special educator. I thoroughly understand, both professionally and as a school committee member, the importance of those elements. And I recognize and I pledge to uphold the ethics and charges of the school committee. I very much respect all of that. I think it's important that we know our roles as school committee members. and that is hiring exemplary leaders, overseeing a robust budget, and making sure we invest in people, resources, and the health of our district. In professional development, I understand that. I understand how that system works. The difference between like a global professional development and individual. You know, I also am invested in the future of Scituate Public Schools. My kids have, personally, obviously, you know, we have many, many years ahead of us. I have, you know, a very solid list of accomplishments that in collaboration, and I have a lot of goals that I'd like to see us meet as well and continue to. As I've said before, I'm a doer. You can see that based upon my record. Mental health and student and staff wellness is something I'd like to see us continue to grow in. Continuing to expand opportunities for community partnerships, relationships with, you know, connecting us to colleges a little bit more. I'd like us to continue to work on those standardized test measures, and you know, I think part of that is reframing and reshaping how we approach these things, from being kind of this stressful burden of MCAS and testing to this, you know, to being something that's a wider, you know, just one part of a wider scope of our students' skills and successes. You know, I'd like to see something that's actually happened during this campaign, which is amazing, is increased opportunities and equity for our Boston-based students to participate in clubs and athletics, and we've done so through increasing, you know, some late buses for those students. Something I'm still really, I've not taken my eye off the ball of, though it has not come to fruition yet, is looking at our school start times. And I think we need to really be clear and better communicate about the chain of commands, that if somebody has an issue, you know, the first stop is the teacher, and then we kind of work our way through that, through administrators. I'm thankful because this opportunity has given me a chance to meet so many wonderful community members. And, you know, as a candidate, just getting out there and meeting people that I might not have otherwise come in contact with. So that's something that I'm really thankful for. I'm proud to be a Scituate resident, and I'm proud of the work that we've done, and I really, really hope to be able to continue to serve the students and families in Scituate Public Schools. So I'm asking for your vote on May 21st to be able to continue equity, accountability, transparency, excellence, and empathy. And I hope that my record and my relevant experience qualifies me to be continue to be in seat 2. So please vote on May 21st. And if you want to dig a little deeper into some of my initiatives, my website is NicoleBrandolini.com.
Nicole Brandolini, thank you for being here. And remember, folks, that election, May 21st, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the Scituate High School gym.